We are live here on You Be the Judge. Bridges presents You Be the Judge here every Wednesday. And as all the things pop up online, you can get it on your iHeart, Apple Tunes, and wherever you get your podcast. Just put in Bridges Live, You Be the Judge, and we will pop right on up. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. My other beautiful co-host is Marylin Pierre, who's running for Circuit Court Judge of Montgomery County here in Maryland, and Judge Claudia Barber. So we would like to welcome everyone who visits with us every Wednesday here at 6 p.m. If you have any questions or comments, you can always put it in the inbox or wherever the live media you do see it, whether it be YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, or wherever you have it. Even if you download it and watch it later, you have any questions, always contact us. Because ultimately, what we try to do here, You Be the Judge, is give a lot of information, hopefully get some clarity and understanding, and then hopefully you can put into an action. Those are the three main things why we do You Be the Judge. It's to meet great people, have great conversation, but more importantly, it's about information. And then it's about understanding. And then you have an option. You have a choice. You then have a choice of putting yourself into an action. And hopefully when you start acting, we start being better people. Marilyn, how was your week before we get into our guest? Because our guest is here on time, which is awesome.
Yes, it is awesome. Yeah, woo! And I can't wait to get started. And I love the way that now, when you say beautiful, you say co-host. So that reminds you that Claudia is in there too, and it's not just me. And that way, you don't have to go like,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah, I meant to say that.
And I have my sticky note. All I remember, I have my sticky note right here, plastered on to make sure I do say that. So
Uh,
that is important.
yes, that is important because my little ego was starting to be hurt.
You know,
We have this
I'm not sure.
running joke that Paul only says beautiful co-host when Claudia is here. When I'm here, he just says my host. And I'm like, hey, what about me? Not even my beautiful co-host Claudia and my somewhat intelligent, not quite dim-witted co-host Marylin Pierre. Not even that. Just just a throwaway line over here.
Well,
So yes, I had a very, very busy week and I am glad sort of that it rained today because I was going to have a very busy day, but because it rained, we decided to slow down. What about you? How was your week?
the week was good. I was a guest on a live broadcast, national broadcast station, talking about Black men's mental
Oh,
health because this is Mental Health Week, Mental Health Month. So I was talking about Black men's mental health and mental health in general. So that I love talking about the understanding of where we are and how we think and the causation. And before we get into our host, we got to mention this because it is all over the news. We have people who are at the Capitol right now doing their protesting. It is the Roe v. Wade. Okay, I, I'm not. Unless you want to share your thoughts, Marilyn. What are you thinking?
I'm not allowed to share my thoughts in public,
Yeah,
but
well,
I'll listen to your
well.
thoughts.
Here's the thing, and then I'm going to share my screen real quick, and this is my thought. So I'll explain my thoughts after I share this bit of information. So I'm going to share this. So can everyone see this?
Yes.
Good, great, because it says that the forced sterilization policies in the U.S. Targeted minorities and those with disabilities from the latest into the 20th century. I mean, you can read any article about what the U.S. has done with forced sterilization, and they've been doing it for a long time to minorities, Native Americans. They've done it to anyone they deemed unworthy, right? So when we talk about Roe v. Wade and we're talking about an abortion, it's still sterilization, still taking the rights away from a human being. Here's the thing: I'm on the fence of civil rights and fighting for a right to be called a human being. This doesn't seem like it ever touches that, even though it was done in about 73, right? It was done in 73, and it still is never touching on the fact that the United States, depending on who you are, they took away your rights of what you can and can't do. And this has been going on. I'm not making this into a racial thing, but it is a racial divide of how it's being viewed and looked at. Because this is not, the many people around the world was never this upset over the other sterilizations that's been going on for decades. So that's my problem with this uprising. It's not so much Roe v. Wade and his abortion thing, because my personal view is that a woman's right to over her body is her right. That's just my personal view. Because as a man, I don't feel I can ever imagine this happening to me. Right? So that's my personal view. What do you think about where I'm coming from in the civil rights thing, then, Marylin?
Well, I think it is a very good point. And we could talk about how maybe back then people didn't know exactly, what was going on, because I doubt that unless you were reading medical journals, that this would be something that would be coming across in the local newspaper, for instance. So things were going on, but people might not have necessarily have known. One of the things that I find really shocking about this situation is the breach in the United States Supreme Court. As a lawyer, I find that extremely appalling, because the idea that you cannot trust the other justices,
Right.
the law clerks, the staff,
Right.
that is a humongous problem, because they're supposed to be rules of confidentiality
Right.
that doesn't leave the building. And for someone to have, I think they said 4 people,
Yeah.
to have done that that is something that really needs to be directed
I
and looked upon as well. As of course, people have issues in reference to whether or not, when life begins,
right.
and what that means in terms of whether or not uh, abortion should be legal, and to what extent, and so on and so forth. Also, the question that happens is, if the justices are saying that the decision in Roe was not built on solid ground, and then all these other decisions that were built on the right to privacy also will be problematic in the future. And I keep wondering if we're going to start rolling back things to the point where women are living in a world like is depicted in The Handmaid's Tale.
I tell you, because when they said it was not built on solid ground, that allowed the barn doors to open to start peeling back. Or how about just roll it back and destroy it? So I want people to think about that. So I did want to bring that up on You Be the Judge here. So people remember, this is about information. This is not what our opinions are. Go do your own reading. Go do your own research. This is an understanding about what is about ready to happen when they said those words. So Marylin, and we get right, and maybe
And
our guest will have an opinion. But Marylin, you want to introduce our guest, or is he going to do it?
before I introduce our guest, sorry, William.
It's all right.
Is a man of the law, so he knows exactly, and you probably want to add your 2 cents too when you get to that point. I think also what's problematic, and the reason why I have such issue with the rollback and of the privacy argument, is that before some of these people got appointed, not the justices, but some of the lower court federal judges, before they got appointed, some of them were asked whether they thought Brown versus Board of Education was good law. And some of them would not answer it, which means to me that they thought that the decision was problematic. And now I'm thinking, are we going to get to a point where some state passes a law and that goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, "Oh no, that's not good law," and then you go back to colored fountains, Black people coming in by the back door, Black people not being able to eat in certain restaurants or trying on clothes. I'm really scared. If in 2022 we could be having this conversation about the right to privacy. Wow. Okay, so I said my 2 cents.
Well,
And so now I'm giving William the floor so that he could introduce himself and let us know all about him. Okay,
thanks,
go ahead,
William.
William. You've got the
All
floor.
right. First of all, Marylin, thank you. Dr. Paul, Dyer, thank you. And everyone else, thank you for having me here tonight on You Be the Judge. You put a
Woohoo!
pretty provocative issue on the table. It's funny because that's an issue I had to argue in moot court in law school. And Dr. Dyer, to your point about women's rights, and I'm not, this is just information. In at least 22 states, if you shoot a pregnant woman who's in their first trimester, you could be charged with double homicide if you kill her and the baby. So, to your point about human rights and civil rights, there are rights of that, you know, baby. So just information. Um, but yeah, so it's a lot to it. But I'm running here today not to decide Roe v. Wade or to my own personal views on abortion, but to let you know I'm running for the county council seat in District 5 of Montgomery County. William Monty, I'm born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, came here to Washington, D.C. to attend the great Howard University.
Woohoo! Go Bison!
Yes, HU.
You know.
Yeah, And so fortunate and blessed to meet my wife there, Nancy. She's a therapist at the Adventist Hospital in Shady Grove. And I was just talking to one of my colleagues who's also in the race, and we were just talking to each other about why we're in this race. I had the fortunate opportunity to meet a lady a few months ago, several months ago now, and she's a small business owner in Rockville. And she happens to own an automotive body shop. And she's having problems with contracts with the county and other things. And so just being a voice for people like that and making sure small businesses are represented vigorously and with strong advocacy in our county council. And not just for small businesses, but to also establish and reestablish our county as a place where businesses are treated well. Our laws are friendly toward businesses. Our laws are fertile for entrepreneurs. So we can really be the area of choice when the next Amazon comes through and is looking for a place to plant their headquarters. Because I just believe that higher paying jobs, and let's just give you the facts, our county has grown in the last 5 to 10 years, but the jobs have outpaced, the lack of jobs have outpaced the population growth. So in other words, we haven't kept up with our population growth, and that's a huge thing for my campaign.
Well, very good. You're running. Oh, sorry. You're running in District 5. What area does that cover?
District 5 includes Silver Spring and Burtonsville. So with the redistricting, they have they have cut off downtown Silver Spring. So my district in Silver Spring goes all the way down to the Beltway and everything north of the Beltway in Silver Spring and all of Burtonsville.
So that is right in my backyard. But I have to give you some props there, young William. Well, you're not young, but you look like a young Thurgood.
I'll take it.
You look like a young Thurgood. Has anyone ever told you that at Howard?
No, because I look like a young Thurgood.
No, you.
Yes, I do. In my mind, I look like a young Thurgood, and so reality doesn't play into this.
So I had to. You're a fine-looking young man, and doing what you're doing, and so here I ask all the hard questions, and so I'll let it put out there. In Montgomery County, in Maryland, is a very segregated county. We're the largest county in Maryland. We're over 1.3 million people, and yet the white minority still controls the money purses here in Montgomery County. And you being a Black attorney, which we also know Montgomery County also takes away a lot more Black attorneys' licenses than any other county in Maryland. And there's a lot of mazes that you must have come up against. And yet now you're running for that seat that's going to help probably peel that back or destroy it. Now you're running up against could be some angry people that doesn't look like you or me.
Yeah, Dr. Dwyer, you really make a good point. You know, I did some research on how did our county get where it is, or at least how did the fifth district get to where it is. One of the biggest issues you'll hear people talk about that are running for the fifth district is an equity issue. And I had the privilege of talking with a very senior former statesman in the county. And I asked him that question, how did we get here? And he gave me a very candid answer. You know, it was just neglected on purpose. And so without getting into the details of all that, I believe that myself running, one of the ends of my campaign is to, on purpose, bring attention to our area, our county, the East County. In other words, just really help to push the balance of resources back in this area and the right kind of investment in this area. You know, what you're talking about is I mean, it's a worldwide problem, really. But yeah, we have to just keep working at it, chipping away at it. 1 year, one election, one piece of legislation at a time. And I'm a big proponent of public-private civic partnerships. I think that's the most effective way to have change like what you're talking about, because you're really talking about like social economic change. And getting people in a better place to earn better incomes so that the distribution of wealth can be more equitable.
Well, you answered my question and you really hit it on the head. And I thank you for being candid about some of the issues that it was and is, and it could be still until we get past the see, my buddy doesn't like the question itself.
He didn't like my answer.
Or if you're getting Sadie upset, that must be some question that's coming.
So bring some doggy treats.
No, it's not Sadie. So it's Addie. Yeah,
Judge Claudia Barber, the other co-host, is here. Welcome, Judge Claudia Barber.
The beautiful co-host. You might as well say it.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here every week. So welcome to our guest. Thrilled you're running for Montgomery County Council.
Yes.
So that's a wonderful endeavor. And with most candidates, we're always concerned about the platform and keeping the promises that are made during the platform stage. And as you're rolling out, you know, the reasons why you're running, you know, we hope that, you know, there is an agenda of improvement in various areas, from education to transportation to the economy to also not just the environment, but also the I lost my train of thought, but it'll come back to me. You know, it's, you know, those areas, you know, we look at them and we say, okay, oh, great, we have someone we hope will, you know, improve education and improve the budget. I'm impressed with the Montgomery County Council and the equity theme measures that initiatives that they've taken. However, I realize you mentioned that the area that you cover is Burtonsville, which is about maybe 5 miles from my home, because I'm on the Anne Arundel County side,
Okay.
5 or 10 miles. But you said Burtonsville, Silver Spring. But we did have a guest on our program just a few months ago that was concerned about Bethesda cemeteries and slave cemeteries that were not being preserved and they were being built over. And what are your thoughts about that, and the efforts or initiatives in the county to try to silence her?
Wow, I'm not aware of that issue of slave cemeteries being built over. However, I believe that, where I went to law school in Michigan, the um, the Underground Railroad ran through part of Michigan, and um, there were very nice memorials made at certain points along the railroad, the Underground Railroad. And I think we should have that same kind of reverence for those slave graves. They obviously African American people, you know, we haven't got the same honor as we should get in our country, and our grave sites are sacred, and they should be preserved, and we should have laws that do that. And that's something we can easily advocate for, and I dare say should be able to get support on all sides for that kind of preservation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we've never had anybody who works for the Securities and Exchange Commission here before. Tell us about that, because you work at the Office of the Whistleblower. Any
Yes.
juicy details that you can tell us? Any tips? Nobody's listening.
Wait a minute, that is not true. This show is monitored by the FBI because of Judge Claudia
The
Barber.
FBI, the CIA,
Yeah, the CIA,
it's an alphabet soup of agencies.
So we are on the radar. That's why they allow us on the air. It's okay.
Maybe they would like to have some tips too. I mean, after all, they're our federal employees, and they might want to pat their retirement account. Okay, go ahead, William. Tell us, nobody.
It's the Office of the Whistleblower is it's a very interesting place. Obviously, I can't talk about anything there. So, but what is interesting is that if someone sees something happen at their firm, their investment firm, they can call in and have a way to address it, and then we can go get the bad actors. But what's interesting is I had the opportunity to actually monitor the hotline this past week. The guy who does that is on vacation, so I took her for a couple of days, a couple of mornings, and it's just very interesting. People there are people who file serial claims. That means that when you file at the SEC a tip, you have the potential to get a whole lot of money. In other words, people they recognize that you could be losing your career, and so they try to incentivize you with a lot of money that could take care of you the rest of your life. And so to that end, there are people around the world that know about the SEC that are what we call serial filers. And if they file frivolous claims 3 times in a row, then they can be barred permanently. So it's really interesting. I mean, a typical settlement may be for one person get a award claim of $3.5 million. I've seen them as high as $150 million. So, wow. But that person, they're going to be blackballed from that company and that industry forever. So my sense is that 2 things. 1, it's necessary to give them that kind of reward. And 2, we need the deterrent, because you're talking about people organizations that make so much money that civil penalties really don't have an effect. It's just the price of doing business, pay to play. I used to get excited about $100 million fine against one of the 5 big banks, 5 or 6, 7 years ago. But now it's like, I just realized that's really nothing. So, yeah.
One of the things that we've talked about here before is how some congressional members, or some members of Congress, are getting rich off of the tips that they know about that haven't become public yet. And it's been in the news. Because of your employment, you probably can't comment about it, but I do want to hear other people's comments about it in reference to what's been in the news about, I think, Speaker Pelosi, sorry.
Pelosi, that's right.
Yeah. And Marjorie Taylor Greene and some other people who have acted on tips. And it's been a huge thing with Pfizer, because Pfizer is saying, you need a vaccine, you need a booster, you need a second booster. And I forgot what percentage of people in Congress that they said were invested in Pfizer, which to me is a huge conflict of interest. I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but if
Well, no,
you know,
I feel the same. I feel the same damn way. I mean, I wonder where some of these people get their oomph from. Why they're still there, and it's the same reason why people run for office and stay for 50 years. These are issues I personally have because I believe in term limits. I believe in term, but they say, well, your term limit is the America voters voting you out. Okay, well, that's not working, really.
That's a lame answer.
Right, right.
yeah, because the incumbent has such an advantage. I mean, such an advantage. It's difficult for them to lose an election.
Well, let's not lose sight of the fact that the judiciary has a role in this too. Because see, they should nip this stuff in the bud and say no, and if they don't, then they're just perpetuating this and keeping it going. If you have, U.S. Congress people, Senate or House member, that's, inside trading or inside dealing, that type of thing, it just perpetuates the system. That's why they stay reelected and reelected and reelected, and they keep going and they stay in there for 50 years.
Right.
Exactly. And I want to go back to William and say, okay, I see all of us in there. So suppose we want our share of the 150 million. Can we say, hey, we think that so-and-so who is a member of Congress is doing insider trading because they're trading on information that they have as a result of their position. Therefore, we want our portion of that $100 million that some people get?
Absolutely. I mean, if you have information that is not publicly known, or maybe it's some analysis that you piece together from different sources that's not obvious, you can go today on the whistleblower hotline and submit a tip and then be entitled to an award. I was curious about Judge Claudia Barber's statement because I had this conversation with my daughter last night about checks and balances and executive branch judiciary is supposed to balance the executive branch. And I would like to know, I was trying to figure out how can judges hold congressmen in check? I mean, and particularly in this type of, because they do come across information that nobody comes across. But yes, if you know some information, absolutely submit it. Now it might take a little while, average case takes a long time, 2 to 5 years, but it's worth it. Because there needs to be some type of check and balance with respect to congressmen. I mean, when I took the legislative process, our whole question was this question we're talking about now. And my answer was a more educated electorate. Politicians bank on the masses of people knowing nothing.
Correct.
And that's just
that is so true. That is just so true.
And the problem with the judges is that, well, not the problem with the judges, the problem with the system is that a judge can't just bring a case against someone. So you actually need the prosecutor, and in this case, Merrick Garland from the Department of Justice, to say, hey, that's not right. You should not be trading on information that you get as a result of your position of trust that the people put you in. You're already getting paid for the job that you're doing. You shouldn't be able to give yourself a bonus, basically, without people, bonus based on the information that you're getting. And you're supposed to be there to protect us, not to, make yourself richer. So so Merrick, should we get on Merrick Garland? Is that our next step?
We should try to have her on the show. You said when you came on that, when you done your research about Montgomery County and the district about how their inception was, by the time even my own personal self and doing my own research about Montgomery County, Maryland, and the other counties, and that's just because I'm goofy that way. There's a sense of gatekeepers and keys, right? And we'll use those metaphors without calling people's names. But if the public does not know, and a small person like me can find out, and now that you're running, you must also know what are some of those things that you've uncovered that would you like to talk about that just shakes your head going, I don't think the rest of the people know this. Or would you like to hold that as a little piece until you get in there?
I would rather hold that as a piece and not share anybody's name. But just to say that, once you're in a place that you can influence, you can push back on that. I like football, so I like to say you can bull rush that and you can stand in the way of that. And, so long as you're secure in who you are, you're not so concerned about getting reelected, you have convictions and values that make you say, I'm going to do what's right, period, and let the chips fall where they may. And that's what I'm about, I'm in this to make a difference and to help change the times in which I live. And so that's how I look at it.
Right.
Yeah, and you used to be a PTA delegate at your daughter's school.
Yes.
And so I know as a member of the county council, you would not be you basically your job is to say how much money the PTA can have. But how would you like, as a parent, how would you like to see them spend that money?
Thank you for that question, Marylin. So I think that I'm thinking as a councilman, not as a parent right now, but as a parent, I would like to have better transportation to all the schools. So we have a great benefit in our county. We have this consortium, East County, North Consortium, Down County. So our children have extra choices of what schools they can go to regardless of where they live. So my daughter took advantage of that for middle school, and we lived in Burtonsville, but she went to Loiterman in Silver Spring. And so there's no bus to go there. So we had to drop her off and pick her up, and sometimes carpool.
That's a drive.
Yeah, it's
especially
okay.
Especially the times of days that you would have to drop her off and pick her up. Wow.
Yes, so I had to get to work super early and leave early so I could pick her up. And if there's no after school program, then there's no way I can do that. So I'm a big proponent of everything we can give the schools by way of resources, programs, after school programs for the kids, which helps parents, which helps families. But there used to be a bus to all the schools. I was told in my research, however, the funding ran out, it wasn't renewed. And so a lot of parents I talked to when my daughter went there said, we need the busing. So I just believe that we can somehow, as we increase busing for public transportation around the county to reduce traffic, we need to add that in for the students to really make this whole consortium thing what it can be. Because some people are going to want to take advantage of school that's out of their local area, but they just can't because of transportation.
But we don't have enough bus drivers. We have issues with bus drivers. Even if you put in the routes, you don't have enough bus drivers, and the pay is so low. No one's like, well, let me just drive these kids around for this route that takes 2 routes and it's only several hours, and then you can't get it's very difficult for you to have another job, right? If you're a bus driver. So there is your problem. I mean, that's one of the problem of getting buses. It's not even the routes. You don't have enough bus drivers.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. And coming out of this pandemic, it's been made worse. A lot of industries have a real shortage of employees. The hospital where my wife works, all the restaurants, schools, there's actually a shortage of teachers. So that is a problem that we need to, I think, creatively address, huddle with the business community, huddle with entrepreneurs and find out some ways to incentivize and just draw people in. I know one way that I'm thinking about proposing is for as there's a statewide legislation to increase funding for schools statewide in all the counties. One of the provisions in there is to increase teacher salary, and the other provision is to make classrooms smaller. My thing is, teachers, they should be able to live in the county that they live in. And so in terms of their compensation package, one of my proposals is to make down payment assistance for some type of housing or condo part of that, just like we do the VA loans for our military. So that's just an idea.
Well, let me give you a pushback there. Here's the thing. I think developers in Montgomery County has such a big hand in a lot of the politicians' pockets. So this is why the housing is so enormous. It's so exorbitant that teachers are not able to live here. So I think if we can get some of the builders, right, out of the pockets of these politicians, maybe that would decrease and you wouldn't have to need a down payment and you can raise teacher salaries. I'm telling you, I asked the hard questions because I do.
That's a great question, and that's getting real. So one of the things I found out is that from my friend who's been in the county for 16 years, there are some developers, like you said, they just crooked. They're not trying to help.
Nope.
Definitely people of color, definitely low income and moderate income people. And but then there's he told me, and I was surprised to hear this because I kind of lumped everybody in one group. He said there are other developers that are on the up and up. And I think we should have a more thorough looking into in the vetting process when we choose to hand out these contracts to developers, and of course, they're going to go with some type of, tax incentive to make so many moderately priced dwelling units, etc. That we uncover that, what you just said, and that's a whole other conversation, but yeah.
Yeah, that is. I found that your work with the the Center for Public Justice in Annapolis kind of interesting. You guys sought to impact issues that by influencing legislation that targeted education and poverty issues.
Yeah. So
tell us about that and how that's going to help you when you get on the county council.
Yeah. Marylin, I'll say the biggest thing that I learned at the Center for Public Justice was a think tank founded by a man named Jim Skillen, who's now passed on. And he was a theologian and a political scientist. And he just tried to look at policy in the most ethical way possible with how can we serve the poor? How can we, make wealth equitable in our country? How can we make laws that imprison people more equitable with the right principles that attach to them? And so I think for me, it helps me to look at policy without being red or blue, but just what's the best policy? What gives the outcomes that really help people and change lives? And so I think that's one of the things I learned from there. So one of the things they championed was charitable choice. Okay, charitable choice. Many people might not like it, and I'm not necessarily a strong proponent of it, but it's.
I'm sorry. Could you please what choice?
It's called charitable choice. So it's something that President Bush championed, and it's also something that Bill Clinton championed. So it was a Democratic and a Republican policy. So under Bush. Under Clinton, it was charitable choice, and under Bush, it was faith-based initiatives. Mm-hmm. So, and what it was just like, you could give money to a faith institution if you wanted to, and the federal, and the federal government could. So, because normally I think they were kind of, unless they were Catholic, they were kind of like cut out of that whole, federal giving grants to and stuff. So. The issue is not whether you're faith-based or not, but who is who has the heart to really help people in that particular vertical or that particular specific area that they're doing social services? Who has the ability? Who has demonstrated it? Who has a track record? And so I think, it just shows you it's not always one side or the other, but it's just more what works.
Let me just kind of interject here that when you think about, largely because I've been raised in the church and I'm familiar with the fact that churches do play an instrumental role. A lot of them have community outreach. A lot of them do. And it's not just, the Catholic Church with our daily bread, but they're partnerships, they're nonprofits. There are people, there are churches that are feeding the poor. There are churches that have food banks. There are churches that have community outreach centers where they do job training. There are churches that are also have a lot of daycare center developments.
Right.
Some of them also have, and I know my church initially they started a daycare center, and there's several churches in the area I'm aware of started a daycare center or school, and some of them again have pantries. That their arms of the Maryland Food Bank did see them as a distributing arm, and even during the pandemic they were there too, not just in the food drives but also in distribution of tests, and some of them were testing centers. And so it's there is an actual factual statement that can be made that churches are there and they are doing community work. That's very clear to me from what I've seen personally myself.
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
I have a question that's going to come up, and it doesn't seem like it's much talked about here in Montgomery County, but we have a crime issue in Maryland. What is some of your ideas on crime and youthful crime and the types of crime? And then, as we talked about before, we have these long, crazy sentences that these young people are getting. And again, the majority of the people that are getting sentenced to long sentences are Black and brown children, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you for that question, Doctor. Yeah, it's a huge question. It's a huge problem. I'm just going to say like this. So there's a 2007 GOA study that talked about how do we solve some of the social ills of illegitimacy, drug use, crime, all these kind of things. And it said that very simply, this is a government study, very simply, increase educational and job training opportunities. And it said it will make everybody's boat float higher. So I just want to add to that idea that, when I worked for this judge, Judge Burnett, he started youth drug court, and that was a goal. The goal of that was to guys that get pulled over with just a joint or a roach or something, instead of getting all this time in a real jail, they would have a diversionary program, and they would get taught, the ills of drug use, and then get some community service work, and then go into a character development leadership training program that would help them have the right kind of insights that would keep them off that path. And so that's what I'm a big advocate for.
Okay, so let me again interject here. Part of the problem with the pulling people over to the side for a joint is community policing and the way they enforce their traffic stops, if you will, to hit Black people more than they do white people. You have statistics to back that up. The other issue when it comes to the judiciary is that there has to be more strong advocates of fixing the disparity in sentencing that has happened over decades. And so, my concern with, the fact that you have a diversion program and the fact that, you have these, not you, but you mentioned, for example, job training. That, to me, that's part of the issue. The policy that hits the nail on the head is everybody should be employed.
Mhm.
Everybody, okay? Don't miss anybody. Go to the public housing and get everybody employed. Give them a job,
Right.
not job training. That's not a job. That's
I agree.
you change the tax base and make people part of the tax base when you get that part of it done. Everybody gets a job. And see, that's where
Amen.
that's where you have this concern over the fact that, even in government agencies, you have certain people in low-level positions, been in the Department for Public Works for 20 years and no promotion. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's just outrageous.
Yeah.
And, so, you've got to have unions that are advocating for automatic promotions because the system is not working. There's no effort to change the wealth gap. There's got to be more policies in there to make it happen. But
Yeah.
To me, the nail on the head is, make this this initiative to get everybody gainfully employed.
Which is why, William, I believe if it hasn't worked in 5 years, get that person the hell out of office and change this shit, because this is ridiculous. If someone's been in office since this has been going on, they gotta go. Not like I'm getting to it. No. We're done. No more I'm getting to it. This should have been done. And if you don't want to do it, now the question is it's on purpose.
Right. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Your actions just really tell you what you're really trying to do. I couldn't agree with you more, Judge, on that. I would just add that, when I helped run a program in DC at Blue High School, we had 2 tracks, one to help kids and train them to go to college, and one to go to a vocational route. But we also had a component of just, trying to fill the void for their understanding about job readiness, character development, how to stay on it once you get it, how to progress in it. And so that was also input in there. And, their principal loved our program.
Yes.
And we had good success, so I'm absolutely, that is one of my hot button issues. Because the crime situation for us is really what you just said.
Why do you think that hasn't happened? Because Marion Barry, that was one of the core points of his administration. He said, if anybody needed a job, just come to me, I will give you a job. And he did. I have yet to run into anybody who said that that they asked Marion Barry for a job and they did not have one. So we know what the solution is to our crime problem. Why is it that solution hasn't been implemented? Do you know why, or do you have an idea why?
I have an idea, and I think it's twofold. I think it goes back to what Dr. Paul Dyer said about people being in place who oppose the advancement of people. That's one. And then 2, the Mayor Barry's youth employment program, when I worked at Blue, it was under that program. So you have to have, it's like, you can't go to the gym one time or for a month or 6 months and expect everything to change. You have to keep applying that solution and keep applying that solution, keep applying that solution until there's some real change over time. And so that's what I believe. And so, and that takes, people, having a certain will, commitment, but also, I'm not one way or the other on term limits per se, because you can make an argument both ways, because when a councilman or a congressman gets in office, his first 2, just say he's in for a 4-year term, he may not know anything the first 2 years, might not have any relationships. But then after his second term, he's developed relationships, he knows his way around the hill, and he becomes more influential and he becomes more valuable to his district. So it's a catch-22. I mean, I think a better solution would be to his people in his district to hold him more accountable. But then you're talking about, are people educated? Do they want to be aware? Do they want to be involved? And that kind of thing. So it's a tough question.
Does anyone have any questions for William? Before we have 10 minutes left in the show, again, I want to thank everyone listening to You Be the Judge. We're here every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We like to bring you our guest, and with this political season coming up, this midterm, we are heading towards I really think this is the most important election of our time, and I'll say it over and over again. This is so important because it's going to shape the rest of the world for about 2 more decades. And again, like Marylin Pierre, who's running for circuit court judge, was saying how the justices said how they framed their wording. Are we going to start peeling back different rules that they don't believe was based on solid law? I mean, that's a scary, scary statement that the justices have said, because so it's up to them to base it on what's solid law, and what else can they turn over and peel it back and cut away? These are I'm not going to jump at shadows and say we're scared and dangerous times, but this is a fearful time. This is a fearful time.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Janelle.
With the climate that you just described, and the precedent is now being disregarded, and they can make up their own rules now. And to me, it's a domino effect. You knock one right out, you're going to take all these rights. I believe they're all racially based at the core of it. Some of them are just a cover to make it look like they're being religious and mindful of their base. Their base here is that one thing, like LGBTQ issues or same-sex marriage, and they jump on that. Abortion is the other. And they want to claim they love a little unborn baby who they cannot see, but the human beings that they can see and have a chance to show their love like they claim, they don't. So how do we, and how would you as a politician get the point across that people need to dig deeper and look at issues more deeply? Because the consequences are so much greater if someone like Trump gets in office, because he may not, but if it's Tucker Carlson, because they say he's going to Iowa, or DeSantis, we're in so much trouble. It changes the whole, like you said, the whole world. It changes our whole lives. We are going to end up like the Handmaid's Tale if those people get back. But how do we get to the voters so they can stop just hearing one thing and running with it and disregard everything else? Because we're a cult. If we vote, America becomes a cult if they vote for someone like Trump, who can do whatever he wants and get away with it, but everybody else has to abide by the rules, like paying taxes.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Zinnia. At first blush, it would look hopeless, because you can't really make people want to know the truth, to look deeper into an issue. But on the other side, I believe that in our country, as it is today, there's more voters by number who believe like you and I do. However, the problem is, I think, gerrymandering. There's no way in our country we should have a House of Representatives that is majority Republican when there are way more Democrats in this country, residents, than Republicans. It just shouldn't be, but it is because of crooked gerrymandering. And I mean that literally. When you look at these maps, they're like, I don't know if you read the Warren report, but it's like that trajectory that the bullet went through to get John Conway and JFK. There's no way a bullet can do that. So there's no way a district can go all the way over here like this. It just doesn't make any sense. So my point in all that is that I think that would be the more plausible solution to me to defeat someone like Trump and his group, is to have better districting so it more properly reflects the Democratic majority in our country. Because I don't think if you put one person in a debate against like a Marjorie Taylor, they're not even talking about the same premises. They're not talking about where people really live. They're talking about some ideology that's just crazy, you know, and it is.
Here's William, here's my pushback. And this is where I think people's silences are speaking loudly. I actually think there are more people who call themselves Democrat who are so very still much voting on the other side. That's what I think. They may talk to you in your face. It's kind of like when we were growing up in the 70s. Be careful of the person, be careful of that person who smiles in your face, and yet they're still going to make sure that they blah blah blah. If most of the black people don't understand what I mean. But when it comes to a lot of white liberal voters, verbally, I think in that voting booth, they still don't want things to change. And the only way I can be disproven is if 150 million people came up to me and said, "No, I don't believe that," and then I follow them in a voting booth, because it's like my statement's so hard to prove. But it seems like, then why are we still on this trajectory of the JFK bullet? It seems more preposterous that we're still in the same situation. If all you people who agree that this isn't right, then how is it staying the same?
Yeah, I
That-
mean,
You know, go ahead.
I just want to say this real quick, and I agree with you, but to some degree. But if you go back to Gore v. Bush, Gore had more votes than Bush.
Right.
If you go back to Hillary and Trump, she had more votes than he did.
But we never had a populist win an election. We've always had the Electoral College.
So that's my point. There's something wrong in the way we're administering our elections, because both those people would have been president had we gone with the popular vote. And it goes back to, you know, it's just the way our country was set up. It was set up so that certain things couldn't happen. But however, Barack Obama, he penetrated that, you know. I mean, he got a lot of white voters and all black voters, like 80%. So I'm just saying that, you know, it's just the struggle.
But then the answer, sorry to interrupt you, William, but then the answer to, well, then the question is, how come nothing changed? Like nothing changed under, well, very little changed under Obama, very little changed under
No, that's it.
a certain president, but a lot has changed under Trump. So I go back to, it's the way power is yielded under certain administration. I think that I don't think so much, I don't see it so much as a Republican Democrat thing, as in those who want to yield power and those who don't, because they're satisfied with the system. So the Democrats have been saying that, you know, at least we're not as bad as the Republican. And I think we have to say, well, that's not good enough anymore.
Well, it's also branding. And to add to the whole, or to supplement to what everyone has said here, you know, if you know, one of the things that people have been in the Republican Party has been hypocritical about is abortion.
Absolutely.
You know, now, if your candidate has adopted an unborn child that was born, you know, or in some way adopted an unwanted child, then you're making sense to me in a way. But if your candidate is not doing that
at all,
they're just talking.
Right.
They're just talking, and there's just nothing behind that.
Right.
I don't even.
In fact, I know a pastor who actually was a Republican. He is a Republican, and but he adopted children that were unwanted. You know, so there's a message behind the, you know, unwanted pregnancy. But people who you know, subscribe to this notion that they're just talking, you know, that, you know, and you know, that they're part of this platform too. The right to lifers. If they haven't adopted children that are unwanted, you know, that's some of that is just talk.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I ask is for them to, if that's going to be your policy, be consistent, be against the death penalty.
Right.
When
That's
someone
right.
is pregnant, give them health care.
Right.
When
That's
someone
right.
has
Right.
a baby, give them family leave so
That's
that way they
exactly
can keep
right.
their job and still work.
Be
Give
against war.
them, yeah, exactly. Be consistent. You
Exactly.
can't just pick and choose which one you want. So
William, you have our last voice before we can take off the air because we're here from 6 to 7. So give us your last words before we take off. And publicly and privately, I would like to have you back on whenever you feel like it. So please.
First of all, thank you for having me tonight. This was a great discussion. I feel like I've grown because of it. And to Marylyn's deep question, why can't we make change? I don't know, but I do know that we are tasked with continuing to try to make change. Small here and there, one person's life, two persons' life. I will just say this one last thing with respect to one contrast and compare between my favorite president, Barack Obama, and my least favorite president, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan would take his fight to the people, and he used his influence to leap over Congress to get what he wanted. Barack Obama was primed to do that because he had such a gift of influence that he won such a huge margin when he beat Mitt Romney and whoever he beat in the first election. But he didn't do that once he got in the White House. Even though we know that there was a clear, overt policy of no, even if it was something that they wanted, it was no, if he put it forward. But if he had taken the fight to the people, I think he could have been more effective. And I do just want to say he did do some things like he started the Fatherhood Initiative and a couple other things that he could do with executive orders. And I know that wasn't the huge global impact people wanted, but I think that would have made his presidency different.
I agree.
But thank you, everyone, tonight. I just appreciate this. I hope if you can support me, you do. I'm going to do the right thing, period. You can hold me accountable. You'll be able to reach me and ask me, did you do this? Why didn't you do this? And I will do the right thing. That's all I'm saying.
can you please give your contact information?
Yes. My website is williammontier.com and has all my information on there. My phone number is 248-747-1250. I don't know my Google number off the top of my head, but I just appreciate you guys so much, and I thank you. And I definitely want to talk with you again, Dr. Dyer, and everybody else, Dr. Judge, and everybody else. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marylin. I love you, and I appreciate
Thank you, William. I love you too.
You guys be safe. William, I'll get your phone number from Marylin, and I'll give you a text later tonight because she'll text it to me.
Thank you so much, sir. Please do.
All right. Everybody have a
Thank
safe.
you very much. It was such a pleasure.
Be kind, be compassionate.
I look forward to seeing everybody